see what he can do in the midst of unbelievers, on the leading edge with his word, his power, his grace, and his mercy. For God's sakes, we're Lutheran. This is what we know.
Because you're supposed to love your fellow man if you're not doing it.
I do think the church does have a real responsibility to people like this, because I read someplace where a church isn't really a show place for saints, it's a hospital for sinners. And so if a person hates another person, where is he going to learn the opposite if it's not in church?
A hospital for sinners. Wittenberg Project. He's 100% right. For those who say that the church shouldn't be involved and try to phrase this as politics and things of that nature, where else can a Christian at that, let alone a non-believer, see and learn about the love of neighbor and the reconciliation that is possible? Where else can they see that and learn? It's going to be salt and light. Let our good work shine before the world. But people don't want to apply that. They kind of want the easy route out. That's politics. You're CRT. This movie that I'm looking at is A Time for Burning. It's when Lutherans in Nebraska, Omaha, from one side of town, try to include and have real fellowship with the Black Lutherans on the other side of town.
If we do not start now as a church, the world is going to pass us by on the biggest issue of our lifetime. And I perhaps am being over dramatic when I suggest, where were the people of Germany when the issue of the Jews came up? Where was the church, both Catholic and Lutheran? How did they answer it? And Walt, you say, let's take a step at a time. This is the smallest step we know of. Dialogue, talking with one another, understanding. Let's not look back on history and say the church had nothing to do when the integration problem was around.
And this guy's voice right here was real prophetic, being that he's seen this and he realized the consequences of this. We talk about and realize it's the power of the gospel to change hearts and things of that nature. No pushback, I'm not disagreeing at all. But we're talking about in the church. In the church. I'm sitting here literally reading, people have a conversation about, is interracial marriage unbiblical? I'm literally sitting here reading this and seeing people support the notion it's unbiblical, unwise, and things of that nature. Put a clip saying most of the abuse happens when a white woman marries a black man. Blatant racist type comments. No pushback on that. I'm sitting here reading people say racism doesn't exist because race doesn't exist. However you want to word it. You know what people mean when they say that. You know that there is partiality based on skin complexion, melanin, pigment. You know that this stuff is real. And these are people who are in the pews in the church. So if we don't talk about it, who will?
And you don't want to tell that. We're fighting ignorance in the place where there should be the most enlightenment.
I think the Christian community has a great opportunity today to really help change the climate. You know the myth that the white man is inherently superior to the black man? This myth has plagued us for such a long time. To take these myths and to listen to the facts and perhaps to let go of them. For you and I know that it was not the white man, and it was not the white church, but it was the Negro. It was the Negro church which initiated this struggle in this quest for justice and love among men. What kind of attitudes are you sharing with others, your friends, your children, when it comes to race relations? What is your race relations vocabulary?
But for clarity, I do want to say this because I don't want to have a lot of self-righteous people from other denominations being like, see, you have problems too, Let's be honest here. While Billy Graham was refusing to actually stand next to and witness with Martin Luther King, while same era, the same time period that Billy Youngdahl was doing this. Same era. The same time period where John MacArthur was saying, I'm not protesting with those angry people. Christians were talking about, I'm practicing real fellowship, but not literally showing your support and standing next to your brother. Beyond that, this is what people in my tradition were doing. Okay? Not saying it worked, but the overall sentiment was there. And it's hard to look at that, because when you truly say that, people, a fair question is so how come your denomination is so not diverse? Part of that reasoning is, and I'll say this, all these other traditions, they hated black people so much they split. Hate to word it that way, but that's what it is. So when the UMC and the AME, United Methodist Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church, or when the the Black Baptists broke off, things of that nature, they still had people. They still had black people sharing their theology, even though the people they got their theology from wanted nothing to do with them, nothing at all to do with them. So it's not an issue that most black people were Baptist or Methodist or this or Pentecostal because they had effort put out in the urban. That's not the reason why. The reason why is just because a lot of y'all, history had slaves and y'all refused to partake with them, and they started their own tradition from what they knew, so forth. So they end up preaching and sharing the gospel with their people, and it leads to a community later on that still holds those same tenets, even though those tenets came from people with, racist undertones, racist underlines. I'm not saying that, like, for instance, I'm not saying John Wesley was opposed to racism. Whitfield wasn't. But what I'm saying is the way history played out, that goes into the dynamic of why today, and why it was so important for things like what Pastor Youngdahl was trying to do, of saying that, we can't just be a church of word, not word being word of sacrament, but just of empty rhetoric. If we believe reconciliation, let's do it. Let's do it. And this conversation is no more prevalent than it is today. When we look at Concordia Selma closed for various reasons, reality is we have dropped off enrollment of African American students. I saw this other thing when we look at funding. The funding for, I hate the word urban used like this, but in urban settings, inner city sessions is down. It's low compared to what we send to Africa and other places. Shout out to my African brothers, but I gotta look at my home soil. No perfect opportunity to rehash this conversation that they had in 1966.
This one lady said to me, Pastor, she said, I want them to have everything I have. I want God to bless them as much as he blesses me. He says, Pastor, I just can't be in the same room. It just bothers me. How are you going to change a person? I can't sit there and give her a sermon to change it.
This is the burning question and the issue that stands before this church today.
But when
you're committed, how do you get other people to have the same commitment that you do?
I think this is the issue, that when you stand before Jesus Christ and admit that within your heart you are a sinner, that you've got this area that you cannot cope with because you have a hard time loving and accepting these people, you must confess that you are wrong in the sight of God.
Right.
And then someone comes along and pats your shoulder and say, now wait a minute, you're not all wrong. Let's compromise. Christ might be a little bit wrong, and let's come together a little bit in the middle and make a nice package, because, we need the money for the church and this and that. No, we've got to make a clean cut. When you stand before Christ.
Some of the fears that we heard in this documentary are some of the same fears that I personally think that we still face today in our denomination, our tradition. And we have let a time pass where we kind of stayed on the sidelines. And a lot of times I think people think they're scared of losing something. They're scared of, this is our German heritage. We have to do it as we always done, and things of that nature. And it leads to a lack of effort and lack of concern. But for instance, I'm a Lutheran by conviction. Not because I like the music, not because it goes back to my family roots or history in Germany and things of that nature. I could tie it back to African Christianity, since Martin Luther, before a lot of this got big and popped off as an overall confession, he met with Deacon Michael from Ethiopia, and they had fellowship. But not even going that route, it's just an aspect of, if we feel our tradition and the way we confess Scripture is the most accurate to Holy Scripture, there's no reason why we should be pulling out of things like Concordia Selma and things of that nature. There's no reason why we shouldn't be funding more outreach to black communities and things of that nature and focusing on it. Because we were already there, now we're not there. We played a big role, and our history shows that we kind of just dissociate ourselves for various reasons. And I think people leaving the church funding, things of that nature, and people are scared to lose, think they're going to lose their culture. Things we shouldn't be worried about when we should be worried about sharing the gospel and things of that nature. And being involved in our neighbor's plight, realizing that, this is the concern you guys have had historically in regards to racism, police brutality. How can we show Christ's love through all this? Pastor Youngdahl was forced to step down by people complaining about what he was preaching as if it wasn't the gospel, when it literally was. We have to do better. God bless and good night.
Little did I dream 1 week ago that I would resign as pastor of Augustana Lutheran Church. I was told that a group of members wanted a change of pastor. They indicated that this was not a case of liking or disliking the pastor. The word mismatch was used. I was told that people were staying away from church because they do not want to hear what I am saying.
Okay, you're going to make it, though. Oh, yeah. Happy New Year, Jack.
The conclusion is that the gospel as they conceive it was not being preached. As I resign as pastor of Augustana, let me confess again my faith in a God who calls men to be in a company of the committed. That our obedience is to the Christ who stands, as always, in the hectic confusion of the marketplaces of the world. That our ministry is centered not in the midst of stained glass windows, but in the areas of life where men reach out for justice, love, and understanding.